Now let's talk about measuring. Whenever you're measuring, the material that you are measuring can dictate what type of measuring tool you will use. We have a T-square, or old-fashioned T-square. That's very good for ensuring that your measuring tool is straight, especially if you have a straight edge on the lumber that you will be cutting. So this is good for measuring lumber. Then we have a carpenter square. This is called a carpenter square. It has measurements on two sides. So this is also good for measuring lumber. You know, it's also good for creating specialty cuts because it's triangular. So if you're measuring, if you need to measure a 45-degree angle, that can be done, you know, straight measurements or more complicated measurements on angles, on different angles. Then we have a combination square. This measuring tool allows you to measure different sizes of lumber or material. It also allows you to measure at angles, so to get angle cuts or straight cuts. It's a sliding ruler on a straight and combination measurements and cuts. So there's quite a few measurements you can do with this. This kind of took the place of T-squares and carpenter squares, because now you have similar angles that you can measure at and straight, and also gives you the ability to line up your measurements with the straight edge of the lumber, just like the T-square. And then you have a speed square. This is called a speed square. This is, as far as tools, measuring tools are concerned, is one of the newest tools that are available. And not too many people are comfortable using it outside of making straight measurements or measurements at different angles and degrees. It's called the speed square because it is taking the place of these three tools here. It takes the place of a T-square because you can line it up with the edge of lumber or other material. Your carpenter square, you still have the same measurements on the sides. You have measurements for different angles and degrees, just like the carpenter square, you know. So, and it also allows you to measure different angles from an edge of the lumber, just like your combination square. So this one can be a bit more difficult to learn to use because it's so many ways that you can use this tool. You know, you have simple straight measurements and more complicated angle degrees. This allows you to measure fairly quickly too if you're doing repeated measurements on lumber or markings on your lumber for cutting. You know, you can speed up. This also is excellent for making stairs and other complicated cuts. If you're building a roof on a shed or on a chicken coop, this is a tool that you would want to use because it allows you to cut lumber and other materials at different angles and degrees, from 90 to 45 and more.
Can you show us how to use it to draw an angle?
Yes, to draw an angle, I'll use my trusty marking tool, a straight edge screwdriver. So to make an angle, this is your pivot point here, this corner. So to make a 45-degree angle, I have to pivot to 45. So now I will line up my edge here and swing this over to 45. Once I hit 45 on the edge, now my 45 is here. My 45-degree angle is here. And when I mark it out, you can see from this edge to here, it's 45 degrees. So your pivot point to whatever degree you need, anywhere from 5 degrees, 10, 15, 20, 45, 75, 85, and your 90 on the edge here. So it's different ways you can do that. You know, so this is a very good tool to learn to use. Now, this is another measuring tool. You know, we're familiar with this. It's a tape measure where you have from 0 all the way to 25 feet. I like to use a 25-foot tape measure because it's long enough to measure most things that you will build in the garden, and the other ones that go up to 100 tend to be a little heavy and sometimes a bit more difficult to use, but this one is very easy to use. You have your increments from 0 all the way to 25 feet. All right, this tape measure is also laid out for carpentry work. When you're making walls or flooring, your support beams should be 16 inches apart on center. And this tool allows you to do that. You have 16 here, 16 again is 32, 16 again is 48, and so forth and so on. So right away you can easily find where your support beams should be, 16 inches apart. So that's measuring. There's a lot of ways of measuring. Let's move on to cutting.